Hey, I'm Joel Wanasek. I'm a pro mixer and co-founder of NailTheMix.com, one of the coolest places to learn how to mix rock and metal music on the internet. And today we're going to break down one of my personal favorite modern heavy mixes, which is Stray from the Path, Fortune Teller, mixed by Will Putney. I absolutely love this mix. I think this mix crushes. It's one of the best sounding things that's been put out in more recent years in the genre. So let's have a listen to this mix and we'll talk about it. I like that guitar tone right out of the gate. It catches your attention. It's got a cool tone to it. All right, here we go. All right, it sounds massive right out of the gate. What makes this sound massive? Okay, let's break this down and analyze it. So the first thing that stands out to me is the bottom end. So let's listen to the bottom end. All right, the entire bottom end comes from the bass guitar. There's a little bit of sub thrust in the kick drum, but the kick is definitely above the bass in terms of the frequency spectrum, right? So there's some bottom and some sub and some push in the kick, but that bass guitar is absolutely freaking massive. Like, it hits like a sledgehammer. It has a ton of weight, a ton of energy, and a ton of movement behind it. And like I said, you know, it's like a 10-ton bag of bricks. And because there's not a lot getting in the way of that bottom, it's just, you know, it moves, it sounds crushing. So let's listen to this. Now listen to the way the guitars and the bass interlock. So the bass has this massive, crushing, droning bottom end, right? That kind of melds into the bottom of the kick. And then the bass is kind of scooped out, right? In terms of the mid-range. And in the mid-range, you have a lot of guitar energy. Like, we'll call it 600, 700, 800 to 2K. You know what I mean? Like, the guitars don't have a ton of bottom on them. It's all bass, right? It kind of flows right in to the mid-range, which that hole is filled in with the guitars, and then there's the top of the bass, and it sounds badass. You know what I mean? It's like a perfect C. You know what I mean? Like, you have the bottom of the guitar, the bass just fits right in there. You know what I mean? It's badass. I just love how that connects. Okay, let's talk about the drums and the way they hit on this chorus, because again, that's also part of why this part sounds super massive. I know Will loves distressors on drums. These drums sound like just beating the piss out of with distressors. You know what I mean? Like, there's a certain snap and crunch and distortion that a distressor has, which is, you're not a mixer. It's one of the most famous compressors ever. It's so sick on drums. So like, when I hear Will's drums, I just hear the sound of Neve and distressor, and I love it. You know what I mean? Like Neve EQ, it has so much weight to it and smack, and it sounds sick. So the kick has got a nice upper click to it, you know, snap. It's not super bright. Like, we're not talking like 8K, you know, I hear more of like a 3 to 4, 5, somewhere in there, kind of just little peak. You know what I mean? It's not very bright, but it's just got a nice upper thwack to it. It's got a kind of a sticky sound to it. Again, that comes from like the distressor, the push and pull of the compressor. The snare is pretty cool. I call a snare like that hyper cranked, right? When something is like super compressed and just smashed, got a nice bit of an EQ bump, and it kind of, you know, like there's a bunch of room and things like that kind of blended into it, and it just all smashed together into a compressor, and it just makes this really, cranked sounding snare. That's what it sounds to me. The snare is super cranked, and I freaking love it, and it's badass. Check out the snare here on like the ghost notes. I see my father's shadow, my soul is critical, my gravestone, like, that pocket is badass. The way that ghost note snare, like if you had a really soft ghost note here that really wasn't part of the pocket, the whole part would lose the groove. And a lot of the groove and what makes this part work here in the verse is just the way that pocket bounces off that snare. And then it comes with that sick flow on the vocals. I mean, it's sick. It's badass. I love how this, like the snare and the vocal flow there, it just works. Another good word for the drum sound in this, aside from cranked, I'd call it loaded. You know what I mean? It just sounds like a loaded gun, just, you know what I mean? Like, it hits really, really hard. So the kick and the snare are super loud, super forward, and they really drive the pocket, which is important in something like this. I like how loud the cymbals are there. You have a ton of ride also, and you got that kind of like, I don't want to say sporadic, but kind of like ding, 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 kind of pattern on it. It drives a lot of energy, right? And if you have the cymbal kind of in the back, it wouldn't play off the groove. You know, it's like you have the combination of the ride cymbal catching your attention with the snare drags and ghosts and stuff like that and smacks. And like that's groove with the flow. Like that's what makes this part awesome. It syncs right with the vocal mix and stuff like that. So that's mixed up very hard to really push that groove and push that energy. And if that, you know, if the cymbal was down there and you didn't hear as much ride, the whole groove again would fall apart. So brilliantly mixed. It sounds badass. All right, let's talk about these vocals. I love the flow. Listen to how they're mixed. They're not super bright. They're very mid-range, pretty well compressed. They're not insanely loud. They're kind of put in the pocket. Like the ride cymbal's a little bit louder than the vocal. But again, you can hear everything clearly, and it's also metal, right? We're not doing pop or rock, right? We need to have super crank vocals. So the whole, it just brings a lot of energy into that flow. Now pay attention to the ambience on the voice. There's actually kind of like a cool, it's almost like a slap back delay to it. You know what I mean? Like a very fast delay time with some reverb. It almost sounds like a close echo. And it's got a very neat ambience to it. It's unique. Again, it stands out. It's a different sound than, you know, for example, if you're doing like a rock mix or, you know, like a lot of other heavy genres. I love it. The vocal is super saturated. It's kind of bright, but it's not like overly cranked on the top end. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't have like there's not a lot of like ultra top to it. You know what I mean? It's more in like the 3 to 5, 6, 7, 8K. And it's not overly bright, but it's just enough where it sticks out, but it gels perfectly into the mix. I love the cymbals. They're very, very smooth sounding. Again, not overly bright. They have a great mid-range to them. They're kind of rolled off on a lot of the ultra top end. And it just makes for a really warm sound. I know Will mixes hybrid, so I know he uses a lot of hardware in his mixes. And I think that adds, like the reason that Will is able to get so much energy out of his mix, aside from like techniques and things like that, is, you know, the type of hardware he uses, like the distressors have a ton of movement to them in terms of energy. The Neve EQs that I know he likes, those have a really punchy, fat sound to them. He's using a lot of equipment that's very, very flattering for this type of music. The tone of his mixes is awesome. You know, and the combination of the type of equipment that he's using and the way he mixes and hears and EQs, it's like a perfect marriage, and it just creates an incredible sound. And that's one of the reasons I think Will is one of the best modern heavy mixers, is because, you know, a lot of people are mixing the computer, and what happens in the computer is sometimes you lose that like visceral energy. Like there's a certain push and pull that you get on hardware, and a certain roundness and weight in the bottom, the way that energy transfers through a speaker, that kind of gets lost in the computer. If you've experienced it and you've mixed on both formats, you'll know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, I'm trying to explain it. Like when you're mixing totally in the box, right? Totally digitally, there's like a certain kind of like a flatness to it. You know what I mean? It sounds kind of stiff. I picture like a picture of a painting, right? As opposed to being in the gallery and seeing all the bumps and the depth and the 3D, right? You lose some of that. So the fact that Will mixes hybrid, there's just so much depth, energy, and life and size and like organic movement to the recordings. And man, I just love his tone. Like I absolutely love it. I love the mixes. It's fantastic. Yeah, I like the volume of the cymbals. You know, they're not too loud, right? They're just kind of in there. They're kind of dry, right? It's not like a super ambient mix. The snare doesn't have like a cave smashing, you know, room sample or anything like that. You know what I mean? It's dry. This band is aggressive. It's got a lot of weight to it, and this mix just crushes. Yeah, what an awesome mix. I love it. For me, what I love about this mix is it's unique. It's got personality. You know, it's got a cool sonic signature to it. You know what I mean? Like the way the drums are mixed, the way the guitar tones are done, you know, like the tone of the actual mix in terms of like the frequency and like the top end versus the bottom. It's super fat. It's got a lot of bottom end energy. It just sounds great. It's fun. It cranks well in a good system. So make sure you listen to it on one, not just like a pair of headphones or something like that. So let me know what you think of this mix in the comments below. This is definitely one of my favorite, more modern, heavy mixes. This has a lot more energy and vibe than a lot of stuff people are putting out that's just like totally mixed 100% digitally. It just has a weight to it. And that's what I love about Will's work. It's organic, you know what I mean? But it's also modern and aggressive, like that perfect marriage between the two. So let me know what you think of this mix in the comments below. I'm doing tons of mixing content. If you want to follow me on TikTok or Instagram, that is at Joel Wanasek. Of course, if you want to watch Will mix, we've got Will mixing with Knocked Loose over at nailthemix.com. It's a super awesome session. You can definitely check it out and get some insight into how he works and the types of decisions he makes and the workflows, and how he produces such fantastic results. across so many fantastic bands. So make sure you check that out. If you enjoy this type of content, please click like, subscribe, hit the notification below. And of course, if you got any bands you want me to react to or any songs, drop them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.